Hey, welcome to The Conversation. You're listening to Andy Mason, and this is authentic conversations around the messy intersection of faith, family, and business. And today I want to talk with you around just that statement. I don't know if you've ever heard someone say to you, especially someone you love, respect, say, you can't do that. There's no way you could do that. Now, whether that's something you're going to start off as brand new, some dream that you've shared, some hope, some wish, some aspiration, or maybe it's something you've said to yourself, I could never do that. I want to talk about this. Now, here's a little bit of context. If you're listening to this and you have off the charts self-confidence and you don't respond too well to feedback, just switch this off. This is not for you. This is for people that are way more sensitive to what others would think or say, and that is the context by which I'm having this conversation with you. So, what is the value of someone telling you that you can't do it? What is the process of that, and what does that form in you and forge in you? I used to believe or think that some of the people that told me I can't do something, that they were perhaps against me, or they were wrong, or I had to defend in some way, or I literally just listened to them and sat back and didn't take on the situation, the risk, the opportunity, the dream that was in front of me because of what they said. I'm now learning and realizing it is completely different. Actually, because of where we've come from, what my makeup and personality is, avoiding conflict, some of the things that I've had to grow in is actually face the disapproval, face the displeasure, face the what people would say or think, and actually persevere in spite of it, because the very opposition, the very fact that they weren't spontaneously behind me saying, great idea, Andy, go for it, because they actually challenged, questions, or was completely negative. Because of that, it forged in me the strength, the determination, the perseverance necessary for me to stand in myself and actually accomplish what is in my heart to do. So let me just unpack that a little bit for you, and then as you're going through this, I want you to ponder, where have you been challenged? Where have you had someone push back on you in regard to some of the dreams, desires, hopes, aspirations, things that you wanted to step out into, and you've had only negative reports, and it's kind of really knocked you? I want you to think about that in the context of what I'm about to share. So here we go, just some examples. Coming from the States to the USA, after a year in this environment, I sensed like the Lord was telling me to step out and do this third-year program and just jump from effectively outside of the norm from a first-year program straight into a third-year program because of something I'd heard. Now, I spoke to my immediate leader about that in a spiritual environment, mentoring situation, and they said, oh no, that's not God, this is not going to happen. I spoke to the overseer of the third-year program, and they say, oh no, this is not God, and this is why. So I had two people in my leadership circle who told me, no, I don't think that's God. It was the first time that I'm fully aware of where I had to make a decision. Am I going to listen to what I sincerely believe that God is telling me to do, or am I going to follow the spiritual or positional leadership around me? Now, a little bit of context. My wife was 100% on board with me, and certainly sensed the Lord was saying it. And the person with whom I was going to do third year, that skipped into that third year program, they were 100% on board with it. I just had two leaders in the environment who were technically in the approval process saying, we don't think it's God. So I had to make that decision. Now, I made the decision to move forward, but struggled with what they'd said. Hindsight, I can now look back and say, I am so grateful that they were the way that you can't do this, you can't do that message, you can't do this, because it forged in me the leaning in on, am I listening to what God is saying? Or if they had been 100% behind it, when it got difficult and challenging, I would have deferred to what they had said, rather than standing on and building an intestinal fortitude is one way of saying it. Perseverance, endurance. You have need of endurance. So that's one of them. I'm so grateful for the opposition that I faced. Another situation, I had a bunch of business leaders come around me as we started Heaven in Business. Wonderful, affluential and influential business leaders who were initially incredibly supportive and encouraging in what we were doing. As we grew, we were about to launch our first ever Heaven in Business conference. It was about 2013. And as we were putting it together, the numbers signing up for this event were very, very low. And so at our kind of meeting with my advisors, they pretty much unanimously said to me, Andy, we don't think that you should do this. You should delay and defer it. There's not enough people signed up. And so their advice to me was, you can't do this now, do it later. You're going too fast. I remember coming out of that feeling pretty disappointed, discouraged, but having to make a decision. They're advisors. So I had a position of advice for them, but I had this conviction internally that this was the right time. I had lined up all the speakers and have everything lined on, which is like in our environment, was lining the planets. And so I had to make a decision. Will I listen to these wise, trusted advisors that I greatly respect, or will I go with what I believe to be true? And in this case, I made the decision that I'm going to go with what I believe to be true. It turned out to be a fantastic start. People were just really, really late to register. But what did it do? Was it a vote of no confidence? Not at all. It was actually probably from a perspective of the advisors, it was probably wisdom, except that sometimes wisdom is a cover for fear. Sometimes wisdom is not the right thing for you to do, just because it may seem to be the wisest of wise counsel from people that you greatly respect. One word from God is better than anything else, even if it doesn't make sense. Hindsight, looking back, again, at the time we could have said they weren't with me, they weren't for me, get rid of them. Not at all. That's the job that they had, to challenge the decisions that I was making so that I make robust decisions. If I only have around me people that agree with me, I'm not going to make very healthy decisions. But the greater gift was this, that the people that I was deferring to for the final word, because they were smarter than me, because they seemingly wiser than me, because they had more business than success than me, because of all these different reasons, I was deferring to them because of my own insecurities and inadequacies. I was faced with a decision. Would I listen to them, or will I go with what my conviction was? Thankfully, I went with my conviction. A greater thankfulness is that they disagreed, is that they said you can't do this, because again, I had to make the decision. And when you make a decision alone, it forges something on the inside of you that you will need in order to step into any realm of leadership. So that's another one. Just so grateful for these. Another fun one is I was leading a group of people through a dream workshop. And in this workshop, people come up with ideas, dreams, hopes, aspirations they'd like to do. And there are a couple of people on that were friends of mine in their very early 40s, and they said, we want to do a half marathon. We want to run a half marathon. And I heard that, listened to it and pondered it, and I was challenged and convicted because here they were stepping out and doing something they said they could never do, a half marathon. And I'm a runner. I've always run, but I've said to myself, I would never do a marathon, because why would anyone do that? That's the stupidest thing ever. Why would you run that far, that long? For what purpose? And so I had told myself I would never do that. What I realized in that moment is I had set a limit to myself of what I could and couldn't do. And if these women were going to do a half marathon and they weren't runners, that wouldn't have been a challenge for me. A challenge would be to do something I said to myself I would or could never do. I was hiding behind that excuse. You can't do this. So what I did is I set myself a target that if I could achieve ability to run half marathon within a couple of weeks, because I'd been running pretty much 3 times a week anyway, that then I'd be on track to hit marathon distance. I followed through, and within 6 weeks I ran a marathon. Now, I don't recommend this at all. I managed to finish it. We did just over 4 hours, but but oh boy, it was tough. But I finished it, accomplished it. But what was the point? I'd said to myself, I can't do this. The very areas where you say you can't do this, you couldn't do this, you could never, whatever it is, those are some of the areas that I'm starting to re-examine and look at the assumptions, because sometimes those are the very things you need to push through. And the very fact that someone said to you, you can't do this, you couldn't do it, you couldn't step into that, whatever that may be, it's the very invitation for you to forge what is necessary in you to push past what people would say, the opposition, the difficulty, the challenge, the questions, the doubt, in order to forge in you the intestinal fortitude, the confidence, the push past to actually do the very thing that you can do, that you are able of doing. So what about some more that I've had to walk through? I remember when we first started Heaven in Business, there was a particular prophet in the area. So that's somebody that is nationally known as Hearing God. This person was not from the local environment, had come and visited, but had a business background and obviously a Hearing God, and had a credibility in Hearing God. And I thought that when he heard what we were doing, he would just be so excited. So I kind of tentatively reached out to him, went and met at his house, and I remember so clearly going up there and talking with him about what we're looking in the plan and the strategies that we're implementing with Heaven in Business to connect, equip, train people to hear God, to partner with God in their place of work and engage in the well-being of the city. And I remember so clearly, he's like, it's not going to work. It won't work here. It won't work in this environment. This environment doesn't have a reputation for business people. And he started to outline all these reasons why it wouldn't work. And I remember on the inside of me thinking, well, slightly confused, because I thought he would be so in favor of this. But then starting to realize there was something on the inside of me started to rise up and say, you know what? I'm thinking that this guy's got all these reasons why he's upset with this environment. And I could try and discount what he was saying, but on the outside in, I actually can understand why he would say some of that. That would make sense on a surface level. But again, he was saying someone I would respect, someone I had high regard for, saying you can't do this and it won't work. Now I look and initially I wanted to discount him. I wanted to discredit. I wanted to say you're just bitter and offended with this organization. That's why you're saying this. In hindsight, I am grateful that he said you can't do this and it won't work, because it forged in me, it provoked me to rise up and believe, is what I've got, is what I'm doing worth it? Is it worth persevering through the opposition, the difficulty, the challenge, the doubters, the naysayers, even those that I would think would be for me? Because it forges again and again and again and again. It forges something in me that is necessary for me to stand up and actually accomplish the very thing that's on my heart to do. It's like a bird in an egg. It has to break through that shell, because breaking through the shell actually forges in it, builds within the bird itself the strength that it needs to endure, to survive, to stand. So, was that all? No, there's others. There's other leaders in our environment that I love and respect that have challenged, questioned, and said, why are you doing this? This doesn't make sense. You can't do that. The very things that they've said initially have taken as great harm or hurt or pain. As I have matured, as I've let go, as I've built and kept going, I realize their words were very much necessary, because otherwise I could have deferred to them, hidden behind their words rather than stand alone, step up. And it's built in me the confidence and courage to stand alone, which has been necessary for me to step into what God has for me. What about you? What are you facing? What are the dreams, the challenges, the desires, the things where others have said you could never do that? I remember when back in New Zealand, when we were doing, we stepped in and I was heading to Uganda to do what you might have called missions work. And I get over there and I was thinking we'd come with business ideas to help these people build businesses to fund themselves. And when I was over there, I realized they don't need business ideas. The biggest lack is not the idea or the ability or the desire to work. The greatest gap is funding with which to grow their business. They can't access this. It's the access to capital. And it triggered me on this journey of learning all about microfinance and small loans and community loans and groups. And I started to do this course and learn a bunch about it. I thought, why could we not do this? And so then I reached out to a very well-known organization that does this globally and does this in Uganda, and thought perhaps if they're already there, already doing this, then they would love to take on these people. Here's some more people that would help them and scale what they're doing. And I remember having a conversation with them and they're like, no, we don't want to do it. We only do it through our organization. We wouldn't be doing it through, in this case, the church networks. And I said, well, what's stopping us doing it? He goes, oh, it won't work. You can't do it. So again, this phrase, you can't do this. And I remember thinking, wow, isn't this the very thing that they did, that they do? And they said, you can't do it. Well, over the next 3-4 years, we did do it. We set up, we started it, we learned. We learned along the way. It was not pretty. It's always messier than you think it is, but that's actually part of the learning process. But again, the very fact that they said you can't do it, that's not a slight or a knock on them. It was necessary for me to hear that so that I stepped up and learned, and took a hold of it and took ownership of something rather than deferring, hiding, stepping in behind somebody else rather than recognizing, you know what, the way that I'm going to do it, the things we're going to step into, it's going to be different. It's going to look different. But sometimes that's the very thing that you need in order to step into what you've got coming next. Right now, I'm stepping in, I'm doing some things that I said I'd never do. I'm doing some individual coaching and consulting and mastermind groups. I'm scratching my head thinking, how's this even working? I'm doing a high level, high cost executive retreat that's an adventure. It's even of myself said I could never do that. Well, we're now doing it. I've now sold 3 out of 6 tickets to go and do it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is working. What's the point? The sheer fact of stepping up and doing something that I said I couldn't do, I'm now realizing the very fact of breaking through those mindsets, breaking through those limitations that maybe others have placed on me, but even more, what I've placed on myself. The sheer fact of stepping in, facing what I am afraid of, facing what people said I couldn't do. The process of stepping up into those things is the very thing that is necessary. The insecurities, the fears, the wondering whether I can do this, that awkward, embarrassing, vulnerable pathway is what is necessary for me to step into what I have next. And I'm so grateful. So I want to encourage you. If you're stepping into some things right now, just say go for it. You need to have people tell you that you can't do it, because that will forge in you what you need to push through. It's like another little barrier for you to push through. That barrier will forge in you the strength to endure when you get into what you need to. So don't knock the person. Actually take it for what it is. Thank you, Jesus, for this opposition that's actually forging something in me. It's challenging what I believe to be true about me, about the situation, about what I'm called to. Sometimes it's the very wisdom to slow down and actually relook at the situation so I do it fully with due diligence. Sometimes it's actually because what I'm doing is wrong. But in the context of this call today, It's actually the things that you know that you need. You know that you know that you know this is what you're called to do, that you will regret it if you don't do it. And the very fact of people saying you can't do this, you couldn't do this, or yourself is the gift that you need to push forward. So if you're facing that right now, I encourage you, push forward, do the due diligence, do what you need to do, and actually relook at it, assess it up, line it up again, and hit it harder and go for it. If it's something that you have drawn back from because of what you've said, relook at it and say, now that you know what you know, actually, is this something you need to pick up because you've got regret, because you listened to the voices of doubt, you listened to the voices of saying that you can't do it, and actually it's time for you to pick it up again and have another go. And number 3, if it was you and you're hearing that and you're like, you know what, you actually don't listen to feedback, you don't normally listen to people say, perhaps this is a time for you to say, you know, this is the one time I'm actually going to listen and stop and just get someone else's opinion. And all of that, I trust that this has encouraged you, helped you. My goal is to connect, train and activate you to step into everything you're called to be and to really make a difference where you are. I'm reading a book right now, I just finished it, called Love Does by Bob Goff. Highly recommend it. And this quote really struck with me. You don't need to ask for permission for what you already have permission to do. And you already have permission to do good, to do what love does. Love doesn't just talk about things, love does something. So if there's something on the inside of you that you know, this is something you've got to do, then don't accept no for an answer. Every no that you've got is just another weight that you've added that's building the strength inside you that you need to endure, to persist, to overcome. So I just bless you with the courage and the confidence to move forward. If you want more on this, check out authentic-solutions.com. Another great resource is the book Dream Culture by Andy and Janine Mason. That will help you. That's got some things in this process. And I just bless you to have a wonderful week.